Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Okay, happy Saturday everybody. I trust you're having a restful weekend. Let's begin. And we begin with the economy today. This week Shanghai hosted the Lujiazui Forum, the big annual shindig for financial regulators and investors, both domestic and overseas. The event is hard to cover, as it's very dry and technical, and one has to pan through a lot to find the gold nuggets. The most important speech during the forum was from the head of the People's Bank of China, China's central bank, Pan Gongsheng. Pan didn't make any surprise announcements, but he did reveal that for the first time the People's Bank of China is in talks with the Finance Ministry for treasury bond purchases in the secondary markets, emphasizing that it will be a gradual process and that the details have yet to be worked out. The governor added, quote, "It should be noted that incorporating bond trading into the policy toolbox does not mean quantitative easing," end quote. Indeed, the head of the central bank made this point several times. Pan said it should be viewed as a liquidity management tool, one that will be utilized with others to foster a suitable liquidity environment. This shift has the potential to rewrite how the central bank injects money into the economy to regulate liquidity. Pan also hinted at interest rate reform, signaling the bank will consider moving to a single short-term rate to guide markets. That could reduce the importance of the current one-year policy rate, known as the Medium-Term Lending Facility, introduced a decade ago. Pan also said that the past monetary policy decisions have amply demonstrated Chinese central bank's, quote, balancing act, end quote, maintaining the right amount of liquidity while not flooding the gate, to use his words. Meanwhile, and while we're on the topic of the central bank, on Friday the People's Bank of China signaled its desire to manage the decline of the Yuan, China's currency, versus the US dollar. The central bank set its daily reference rate for the managed currency slightly weaker than Thursday's. Difference between the so-called fixing and forecasts were the widest since April. Chinese state-owned banks also increased support for the currency. They sold dollars in the onshore market when the yuan edged lower to around 7.2605, according to traders. US-based Bloomberg writes that the yuan has fallen to its lowest level since November and is close to the weak end of its trading band amid broad dollar strength and pessimism about the prospects of the Chinese economy. While Beijing has been allowing the currency to decline gradually, it is wary of triggering a vicious cycle of capital outflows and further losses, favoring stability over rapid declines, the outlet adds. Lujiazui, an economist at BBVA Research, expressed in a note this week, quote, "The People's Bank of China is trying to hold the purchasing power in its own hands. The People's Bank of China is smoothing the overall process of weakening the yuan and deterring markets from betting against it," end quote. The central bank's guidance is aimed at preventing one-way weakness, he added. Bloomberg, in a separate report, argues that the yuan's weakness is symptomatic of deteriorating sentiment towards the world's second-largest economy, which is also seeing a bond market rally as investors seek out haven assets. Benchmark yields have tumbled toward record lows amid mixed economic data and expectations of further stimulus. Fiona Lim, a senior currency strategist at Malayan Banking, expressed this week, quote, "The People's Bank of China is sending a signal that they want to continue its strong control over the yuan and prevent a steeper decline or speculative pressure from building against the currency. Keeping the yuan from weakening too much may lower the risk of incurring the ire of US officials, particularly at a time where China exports are experiencing a recovery. However, defending the yuan also requires FX intervention, which, ironically, is a criteria to be labelled a currency manipulator," end quote. Next up, we move to ideology, and once again we look at Xi's new concept of high-quality development. The latest issue of 九事, the party's top ideology publication, has a lead essay called "Creating a New Situation for High-Quality Development in China." It is a selection of 22 comments on the topic from Xi Jinping himself, made over a 6-year period. The issue also included an article from 九事editorial department and Han Wenxiu, deputy director of the General Office of the Central Financial and Economic Affairs Commission, a top party role. In the article, Han lists 6 main tasks for promoting high-quality development through deepening reform. We take note of them here, which we now quote in translation directly. 1. Deepen the reform of the education, science and technology and talent system and mechanisms, promote innovative development, and accelerate the construction of a modern industrial system. 2. Deepen the implementation of the main function area system and comprehensive agricultural and rural reform, promote coordinated development and accelerate the formation of a new pattern of urban-rural integration and regional coordinated development. 3. Deepen the reform of the ecological civilization system, promote green development and make green and low carbon the basic color and future advantage of Chinese modernization. 4. Improve the system and mechanism for high-level opening up, promote open development and ensure the smooth circulation of the domestic economy and the dual circulation of domestic and international economies. 5. Deepen the reform of the areas of people's livelihoods, promote shared development and continuously enhance the people's sense of gain, happiness and security. 6. Improve the system and mechanism for secure development, effectively coordinate development and security, and achieve a positive interaction between high-quality development and high-level security. Now, this may seem quite dry and somewhat like a word salad, but like I've said in the past, for these key ideological concepts, it's important that we take note of how they're articulated by top ideological authorities in their own words. Next up, we move to nuclear talks and the death penalty for so-called Taiwan separatists. But first, if you're getting some value from today's episode, as always, it's a huge help if you can hit the like button. Liking, sharing, and subscribing are some of the best ways to help the channel grow. It's just 2 clicks of the mouse, but it's a huge help for me. And Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description below for those who want to go the extra mile and help me keep the channel financially sustainable. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Next up, UK-based Reuters, citing 2 American delegates, reports that the United States and China resumed semi-official nuclear arms talks back in March for the first time in 5 years, with Beijing's representatives telling US counterparts that they would not resort to atomic threats over Taiwan. The outlet reports that the Chinese representatives offered assurances after the US interlocutors raised concerns that China might use or threaten to use nuclear weapons if it faced defeat in a conflict over Taiwan. David Santoro, the US organizer of the Track 2 diplomacy talks, told the outlet, quote, "They told us, the US side, that they were absolutely convinced that they were able to prevail in a conventional fight over Taiwan without using nuclear weapons." End quote. Santoro described frustrations on both sides during the latest discussions, but said that the 2 delegations saw reason for continuing the talking, with more discussions being planned for 2025. Concerningly with this quote, however, the Chinese side said that they were confident that they would prevail in a conventional fight, and that is why they wouldn't need to turn to nuclear weapons, suggesting that the assurance was made not with the fear of the loss of the conflict, but with the confidence of a win. The informal discussions between the powers took place with the United States and China at odds over major economic and geopolitical issues. Of course, regular viewers know that the relationship is at its most tense in decades. The 2 countries briefly resumed Track 1 talks over nuclear arms in November of last year, but those negotiations have since stalled. Back in October, the Pentagon said China, quote, would also consider nuclear use to restore deterrence in the event of a conventional military defeat in Taiwan, end quote. Last year, the US Department of State estimated that Beijing had 500 operational nuclear warheads and would probably field more than 1,000 by 2030. That compares to 1,770 and 1,710 operational warheads deployed by the United States and Russia respectively. But China is seeing the fastest growth in new warheads. Reuters reports that since 2020, Beijing has also modernized its arsenal, starting production of its next-generation ballistic missile submarine, testing hypersonic guide vehicle warheads, and conducting regular nuclear-armed sea patrols. Weapons on land, in the air, and at sea give China the nuclear triad, quote, a hallmark of a major nuclear power, end quote. Meanwhile, also on Friday, yesterday, Beijing published new rules threatening to impose the death penalty in extreme cases for Taiwan, quote, independence separatists, end quote. The new guidelines say China's courts, prosecutors, public and state security bodies should, quote, severely punish Taiwan independence diehards for splitting the country and inciting secession crimes in accordance with the law, and resolutely defend national sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity, end quote. Soon after the announcement, the Taipei-based Mainland Affairs Council slammed the move, expressing, quote, "The Beijing authorities have absolutely no jurisdiction over Taiwan, and the Chinese Communist so-called laws and norms have no binding force on our people. The government appeals to our country's people to feel at ease and not to be threatened or intimidated by the Chinese Communist Party." End quote. The widely defined new guidelines published by Beijing detail what is considered a crime, including promoting Taiwan's entry into international organizations where statehood is a condition, having, quote, "external official exchanges," end quote, and, quote, "suppressing," end quote, "parties, groups, and people that promote," quote, "reunification," end quote. Of course, these moves are largely symbolic, as Chinese courts do not have jurisdiction in Taiwan, whose government rejects Beijing's sovereignty claims. Taiwanese officials also very rarely travel to the PRC mainland. But this acts as yet another sign of how dangerously tense cross-strait tensions have become. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a restful Saturday, have a good weekend, and I will see you all on Monday.